Welcome to the Stormsurf video surf forecast for the week starting Sunday, May 21st. Taking a look at significant wave heights for the South Pacific Ocean, we see a little area of, about 32, 33 foot seas. Very small in coverage. That footprint isn't going to do much for generating swell. The general tendency here, you just look at this, when you see this blue, that suggests no seas at all. And then you see isobars heading south. That suggests high pressure. High pressure rotates counterclockwise in the southern hemisphere, opposite of the northern hemisphere. And that just looks like a ridge pushing south. Another area of about 26 foot seas here, but again, aimed southeast, and just nothing really supportive of any swell production indicated. We'll start this week's tour looking off at jet stream level winds. These winds up about 30,000 feet help support the formation of gales when they do form, help direct their track. We see something that almost looks like it was a trough at one time. In fact, we know it was. This trough was actually just here east of New Zealand on Friday. It actually helped support gale formation there and some seas. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But right now, that trough is getting cut off. That is, winds are pushing under it, not flowing up into it. Notice the overall jet stream pattern is one where the northern branch here is about 27 south, running basically west to east. That's called a zonal flow. The southern branch down around 62 south, also doing the same thing. If anything, we see this big gap between the two flows here. That suggests high pressure aloft, and high pressure, basically a ridge pushing to the south. That's not good for storm production. Anyway, we'll roll this out, take a look, and see what's going on. As you can see, it looks like a ridge in the jet. Some energy from the northern branch falling into the southern branch, pushing south, taking aim on Antarctica. A little bit of something that almost looks like a trough, trying to organize southeast of New Zealand on Monday night, but winds are very weak pushing up into it. You really need about 120 knot winds pushing up into a trough to get some, to actually get something going in the atmosphere. Notice this ridge building very strong by Wednesday, almost into Antarctica. The trough remaining very weak here, and that pattern just sort of continues. The two jets actually merge a little bit. If there was more wind energy in the southern branch, we'd say that you might have some promise here, but that is not the case. If anything, look at this. Southward falling winds, just not good. And here comes a ridge building under New Zealand on Saturday, and that ridge builds. Now here's a bit of a trough, trying to organize still, but again, just this weak flow pushing up into it, not enough to really get a whole lot of traction. Roll this out to 180 hours. Another trough looking like it's trying to organize south of New Zealand a week out, but mainly a ridging pattern appears to be the case. Nothing really clearly indicating support for gale development in the upper levels of the atmosphere for the next week. Next up, we take a look at surface level pressure, surface level winds, and as expected, here we go. High pressure, 1040 millibar high in the southeast Pacific. Winds, look at this, pushing straight south. Major ridging pattern going on. There's your little gale that was making some, 33 foot seas. That's going to move east and just get squashed. 35 knot winds under New Zealand, but that's not enough to really generate seas of any interest. Here we go. We're into Monday, continuing this ridging pattern. Yeah, there's fetch under New Zealand, but just not enough, not blowing hard enough to do anything. Bit of another a gale almost tries to get organized here on Tuesday, and it gets some 45, maybe 50 knot winds, but it too is supposed to be falling southeast. The jet stream just squashing it now, but then we get into Thursday, and this low, 948 millibars, very deep low, but the further south you go or the further north towards the poles, the deeper the low pressure needs to be. Much less, this is like a 960 or 964 millibar low if it was up at 40 or 30 south. Anyway, this 40 knot winds aim to the northeast and looking better into midday Thursday. Maybe some support there if this system, and it continues into Friday. Look at this. This is actually looking somewhat promising, but there's a bit of a disconnect between the upper level and what's going on here at the surface. So we'll see. Normally you want to see more winds in the jet stream pushing to the north. We'll see if this materializes. Storm develops on Sunday, 50-knot winds, but again, aimed all at Antarctica and falling southeast. And we're 180 hours out, and then just not a whole lot going on. Let's go take a look at the significant wave heights. And here we go. Significant wave heights for the South Pacific Ocean. There's our little spot of 32-foot seas or whatever it is. And it just pretty much disappears and doesn't do anything. We have this broad area, 26-foot seas, but all of it's aimed either due east or southeast. Nothing pushing up towards California is expected from that. Another gale here, tiny gale on Wednesday. Now notice this one here. Yeah, it looks pretty good, but it's completely outside the California swell window, only good for maybe Chile or Peru. And then we know there's some fetch on Thursday developing here. What's that? 28-foot seas building into the 31-foot range. Yeah, about 31 feet is all you get out of it. But aim pretty well to the northeast. Certainly there should be some 16 or 17-second period swell from this system if it materialized. And again, the whole issue is the disconnect between the upper level charts and the surface. We'll see what happens the next couple runs in the models, see if that's still there or if it disappears. Then after that, and remember, we saw 50-knot winds or more, but that's all falling southeast, so nothing coming from that, and that's pretty much it. So maybe some hope from the South Pacific. We'll see come about Thursday. Now going back to Thursday of last week, gale started to develop southwest of New Zealand, built some 32-foot seas, but these basically pushed right into New Zealand, shadowed relative to Hawaii and California. But secondary fetch developed behind that. Notice this, it's going to push almost due north. There it peaks out at 35 feet on Friday. Rather small area, but lifting well to the northeast. That should push swell certainly into Tahiti, right around in this area, certainly Hawaii, and the U.S. West Coast. But consider how far away it is from here. Size will probably be pretty small, and it will be inconsistent, except for Tahiti, and Hawaii would probably do better as well. And then that was pretty much the end of it. We're into Sunday. So there is small swell in the water right now hitting California, but small is the operative word. We're talking waist high or something like that, maybe chest high sets. This swell will take the better part of a week to get to Hawaii and 8 to 10 days to the U.S. West Coast. And then after that, we saw on the previous chart, maybe something on Thursday. So, we'll see. But kind of a slow start to the season as of right now. And just a quick look at the Northern Hemisphere significant wave heights charts. There was a gale off towards the dateline Western Gulf here a day or two ago. It got seas barely to 20 foot. That'll put small swell into Hawaii and even smaller into California. But Hawaii, that should hit on about Monday. We're talking 4 feet at 12 seconds or something like that for a day. And then we'll just roll this out. And pretty much you'll see this is all wind swell. 15-foot seas supposedly on Wednesday. There's actually supposed to be some 25 to 30-knot winds off of Cape Mendocino. That'll make wind swell into California, and then that's pretty much it. We'll roll this out just to make sure we're not missing anything. Nope, that's it. So, and not unexpected, winter or spring for that part is pretty much all gone now, and the focus is turning to the Southern Hemisphere. Let's take a look long-term. What's going on with the MJO, the Band-Julian Oscillation, in the active phase? That helps support storm formation in the Northern Hemisphere in winter months, and sometimes, if it's strong enough, helps support storm formation in the Southern Hemisphere. And, of course, ENSO, the El Niño Southern Oscillation. Where are we? We're coming out of a La Niña, and where are we going from there? As usual, we like to start the tour looking at winds on the equator, East Pacific here, West Pacific here, that's New Guinea there, and specifically the area we call the Kelvin wave generation area from about 135 east to about 170 west, 5 degrees north and south of the equator. This is actual 5-day average winds from the TAO buoy array, and not unexpected, we see east trades over the entire region. But looking at anomalies, this is the differences from normal for this time of year, and we see pretty much a neutral pattern. Little bit of easterly anomalies here in the Kelvin wave generation area, but nothing too strong. This would suggest the inactive phase of the MJO, and of course that does not a whole lot for helping support storm development in the southern hemisphere. Look at the forecast for the next week. This is the GFS 850 millibar winds. That's up about 4,000 feet, but a pretty good proxy for what's going on down at the surface, and this gives you an indication of what's going on with the MJO. Past history, so the oranges and reds are westerly anomalies. The blues are easterly anomalies, and again, the easterly anomalies are pretty much indicative of the inactive phase of the MJO in the Kelvin wave generation area, basically in this area right here. So we moved into the inactive phase about May 10th or so. Pretty strong easterly anomalies for a while. It's backed off some, supposed to back off more for the next 4 to 5 days, and then pulse again later in May. That suggests the inactive phase is supposed to be in control for a bit longer. Looking at outgoing long-wave radiation models, a good way to look at the MJO. So this is the presence of precipitation. Blues are more precipitation than normal, suggesting the active phase of the MJO. That is less sunlight reflectivity, more clouds. So clouds, one can assume precipitation, one can assume the active phase of the MJO. Forecast for the net building and moving into the Kelvin wave generation area. That's right along in here, about over the next 2 weeks. This per the statistic model. The GEFS, ensemble GFS model, though, not quite so generous, suggesting kind of a neutral pattern right now, but that the inactive phase of the MJO is to pulse again about a week out and hold for 2 weeks, or 2 weeks out from now. So a little bit of a disconnect between the two models. Phase diagram charts, this shows you where the active phase of the MJO is. You're looking down on the North Pole. The MJO moves from the Indian Ocean to the east, over the maritime continent, over the West Pacific and Dateline, under the U.S. West Coast, across the Atlantic, over top of Africa, and back to the Indian Ocean. That's its standard cycle. Right now, the active phase is in the East Indian Ocean, maritime continent, near about Bali, somewhere in that vicinity, we'd say. And the forecast here has it eventually moving to the maritime continent per the ECMF model, but not into the West Pacific. The GEFS model shows pretty much the same thing. Nothing moving into the West Pacific. So this suggests that basically inactive phase, or at least a neutral pattern, is to hold in the West Pacific for the next 2 weeks. The upper level pattern here suggests that, if anything, kind of a mixed neutral pattern. The greens are wet, propensity for precipitation. One could assume maybe the active phase, but it's so weak and so muddled that it just pretty much looks like a neutral pattern into June 10th. 15th, and then inactive, this oranges and yellows suppresses precipitation, inactive phase through the second half of June into the end of June, traversing the equatorial Pacific. And then our favorite model, the CFS model, again, 850 millibar winds. Kelvin wave generation area is roughly right about in here. This is past history here. Notice the blues, this suggests easterly anomalies right now, the inactive phase of the MJO, but by about the end of May, this suggests it's supposed to fade out. Just looking at the winds, and that we're supposed to move into a westerly wind regime after that. Let's add the MJO here. Sure enough, there we go. The inactive phase, the dotted contours are the inactive phase of the MJO, holding into June 10th or so, and then kind of a neutral pattern setting up, but with westerly anomalies, and westerly anomalies continuing through the month of August. Now, this model has been consistently hitting at, some sort of building westerly wind thing going on. It never materializes. The general thought is, at this point, looking at all the data, is that we're in a very, very weak MJO pattern. We were in La Nina. La Nina tends to favor the inactive phase of the MJO all last winter. Now we're probably, La Nina's gone. We'll get into some of that in a second. But basically, we're just kind of in this, neither El Nino nor La Nina. But even at that, the MJO is kind of going to sleep, not doing a lot, not pushing the atmosphere. And that's not particularly good for storm development. Look at the low pass filter here. Here is This is the sort of the indicator, this dotted contour for La Nina. That's supposed to end up be done. It was actually supposed to finish up in sometime early in May, but it keeps hanging on, keeps being around, and now they're saying, or the model's saying, not till June 6th or so. And there was a forecast for El Nino developing the solid contour, but now that's showing up back in the Indian Ocean, suggesting maybe a return. Or now see, here's the dotted contour. It moves from here to here, which is, where is that? That's over California, basically. Drier conditions into California this time of year, not unexpected. So a shift in the Walker circulation, perhaps, but not enough to give you an El Nino, just some sort of a dead zone in between, perhaps. So then we look for guidance in the ocean. So 5-day average temperatures, actual temperatures in the ocean, West Pacific here, East Pacific here. These are the anchor lines on the TAO buoy array, and the X's are the sensors. You see our heat distribution is, warmer water in the West Pacific, but some warm water in the East Pacific too. The 28-degree isotherm, it's been holding right about at 148, and that's actually good. It was back around 175 when we were in La Nina, so maybe we'll call this just kind of a neutral normal pattern. And warm water, it looks like working its way off, but nothing significant. We look at anomalies, difference from normal for this time of year. What we see is definitely not super warm water in the west, a little bit warmer than normal in the east, 2 degrees above normal. This cool pocket here was over here and further up. It's deeper now. That was about 2 weeks ago, and pretty much this is a non-issue. So no clear signs of Kelvin wave production, because we haven't had any strong westerly anomalies or anything like that, but nothing that suggests La Nina either. Clearly, La Nina is dead. Another view suggests, well, maybe things are a little different. Maybe there is more warm water over here in the west. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, with a pocket of 3 to 4 degree anomalies here on the date line, trying to work its way off to the east. This little pocket of cooler water has been steadily dissipating over the past couple weeks and is all but gone. A little pocket of 3 degree anomalies here off of Ecuador as well. So maybe there's a little more hope than some of the charts would lead us to believe. Upper ocean heat anomalies, upper 300 meters of the ocean surface, back last year, June, a year ago. La Nina in control. That pretty much died on about December or so, or didn't die, but from the ocean's perspective, it did die. And then we saw what almost looked like a Kelvin wave, a little bit of warmer water drifting off to the east in March. Warm water building off of Ecuador, and now we see a stronger, what looks like a Kelvin wave, making it to 130, 135, something like that or so. So maybe there is some warm water traveling through that open channel from the West Pacific to the East Pacific, and giving us a little bit more hope that maybe we're certainly past La Nina. Whether we make it to El Nino, hard to say. There's just not enough warm water over here, but even just a weekly warm regime would be better than a weekly cool regime. And sea level anomaly data here, strip out all the waves, strip out wind swell, strip out tides, and what we're looking for is positive values. So like here, 0 to 5 centimeters, maybe a little bit more above normal. That suggests warm water at depth. Of course, warm water at depth sort of expands, creates a little bubble on the ocean surface. Cool water creates a depression. So we see something that suggests that warm water is tracking from the equator to about here, almost to 125 or so west. So that's due south of California. So maybe a Kelvin wave is in flight, and weak warming off of Ecuador and Peru and that area. So again, more confirmation, some sort of warm water trying to move off to the east. That's a good sign. Making a quick look at the surface, sea surface temperature anomalies, differences from normal. We had at one point very warm, 4-degree warm waters, a month, 2 months ago, off of Peru in pockets. That's all dissipated now, but still a generalized warming pattern. And it is working its way along, so this is the Nino 1.2 region here, making its way over to the Nino 3.4 region, starts at 120 west and goes over to about 170 west, 5 degrees north and south of the equator. That's the official area for monitoring El Nino. We don't see anything that looks like El Nino, but there is this persistent warming pattern going on. A little bit of cooling here, but it's only the 5 degrees north and south, so you could draw a box right here like that. Say, yep, that certainly looks a little bit warmer than normal, but not a whole lot. This cooling along Peru has built a little bit in the past couple of days. Even a week ago, we had pockets of warming water building off here. That's since got tamped down. And, no clear signs of a strong El Nino. Now, the other thing that's going on here is we've been in the spring unpredictability barrier. And if you're in some sort of a marginal state, it's really hard to know what's going to go on. And we clearly are in a marginal state. There's just not enough warmth in the west and we're only a year out of El Nino. So if it was 5 years out of El Nino, then we'd say the ocean's primed, the atmosphere's primed for a development of that, but certainly we're not there right yet. Next, we take a look and see what's going on in the atmosphere. Southern Oscillation Index, difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti. Short runs of negative or positive numbers can suggest the active or inactive phase of the MJO. We're into about 7 or 8 days here of positive numbers suggesting the inactive phase of the MJO. 30-day running average sort of smooths out a little bit. We were kind of negative there for a while, but now we're down at minus 2.54, suggesting just kind of a neutral setup. The 90-day running average uses this to look for the presence of El Nino or La Nina, and we're only at minus 2. If it was down about minus 15, we'd say El Nino, but basically dead neutral. And then the ESPI index, differences not in surface pressure, but in precipitation in the area north of Australia and then over in this region right here. The current value is minus 0.24, meaning just a slightly bit less than normal amount of precipitation in this region right here, which means pretty much we're neutral, dead neutral. So all the data we're looking at says we're neutral, we're not in La Nina anymore, we're not in El Nino, but we are kind of warm. There is some suspicious warming going on, but it just doesn't have a lot of momentum and push to it. The question is, what's going to happen as we get into fall and winter? So here's the 30-day average over a longer period of time. January 2015, this is when we were in El Nino, into January 2016, and then the La Nina push, the Southern Oscillation Index, went very positive. But notice since then, we've been going negative. We're not very negative, but it sort of leads you to feel like between this and the warming in the ocean that we're maybe borderline El Nino, trying to get footing. We're in the spring unpredictability barrier, but maybe as we get into summer, this pattern will become clearer what's going on. So one model, the CFS version 2, suggests that water temperatures in the Nino 3.4 region, here we are right in here, at a half a degree above normal, it says. That's probably a little bit on the high side, and it's supposed to slowly fade into October and almost be neutral by January, suggesting, well, probably not El Nino, because you have to be at least at half a degree above normal for 3 consecutive 3-month periods, and this model doesn't say that. But other models tell a different story, and this is kind of interesting. These are pretty much all the dynamic and statistical models on the planet, all on one chart, all trying to figure out what's going on with the ENSO. The forecast, so July, August, September, October, November, December, January. The statistical average model's saying about a half degree above normal. The dynamic model's saying maybe more like 0.7 or 0.75 degrees. CPC consensus saying somewhere around, they put different weights on these models, suggesting maybe around 0.4 of a degree above normal. But then we look at, here's all the models, here's the data for them in their each 3-month period. We roll down here, here's the numbers, and this is out in January. So the average, about 0.75 of a degree above normal as we get into fall and early winter. That would be an El Nino. And another consensus model suggesting, this suggests almost 1 degree anomalies as we pull ourselves into December and January. So the one suspicion, it'd be great if we did go into some sort of El Nino, But the thought is if we did and it was a weak El Nino when we came out of it, we'd probably fall into a pretty deep La Nina hole because there just isn't enough heat in the ocean as it is. And if we expend what is left, then we're going to go into a deficit, and that would probably be a multi-year La Nina. So I'm almost kind of hoping that this doesn't materialize and that we just stay somewhere in the, not even El Nino, just kind of marginally warm and let it build up for a couple of years. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. These models seem pretty optimistic in my estimation. So for now, small southern hemiswell in the water for California. A little bit better one coming about a week out for Hawaii, Tahiti, and California. Nothing huge. And then a bit of a back off again, and then maybe another pulse of southern hemiswell. We'll see what happens come Thursday with the models and see if that gale still holds. Long term, or medium term at least, maybe some sort of a weak El Nino at best is the possible outcome for the fall and winter. But probably more just sort of a normal pattern. The MJO seems very weak, and we suspect that's going to continue because there's just not a whole lot in the ocean or atmosphere to push it one way or the other. Not a lot of energy, and that means kind of a slow storm pattern even in fall unless something changes with El Nino, but we kind of doubt it. Anyway, so that's it for this week. We'll do it again next week. Same time, same channel. Thanks for watching.